All right, now to the content of today's discussion. As context, many of you have joined us in the past to have these reports rolled out and discussed as part of the Powering Peace Initiative, a collaboration between Energy Peace Partners, the Stimson Center, and the Dickey Center here at Dartmouth. And the research is focused on the role of energy in countries that host UN peace operations, on the potential that renewables offer for those missions to better meet their mandates, and for their opportunity to potentially support greater peace in conflict areas that are also affected by low access to energy. This is often a priority of a government, of the different actors in the country. And so we know that some of the UN missions operate in the least electrified countries in the world. So as I said, together with Norway and the United Arab Emirates as partners, they have helped host a series of events to provide a platform for this conversation, to build support amongst member states, international organizations, people in each of these countries and partners, and also to recognize the serious challenges that exist still and trying to bring and expand renewable energy, both for the missions, but for the countries themselves, and to support projects to do so. We're aware that the Secretary General set an ambitious timeline that by 2030, the goal was to have all of UN operations within the Secretariat be based on renewable energy, 80% by 2030. That is an ambitious goal, and it's one that relies on partnerships. The UN cannot do this by itself. And to this point, diesel will remain the major source of the emissions themselves in the field. But as I will hear in a minute, research has shown that a shift towards a mix of energy could offer cost savings and security benefits, and also potentially serve as a tool to support greater energy access and peace building in these countries. What many also realize is that missions themselves are often the largest consumers of energy in the countries in which they're deployed. So the core question is there a cheaper, safer, and cleaner option for the UN, which can also bring new energy projects to these underserved countries and regions that need energy access? So today's discussion will also center on the new report, Renewable Energy and Peace in the Central African Republic. And I will let the authors describe it, but they've got quite an interesting story about how uneven access to electricity is part of the regional and political and economic challenges faced in that country. That MINUSCA itself represents using nearly a quarter of all fuel imported and electricity generated in the country, even as the mission is actively working to transition itself. I'll also note that my colleagues and I here at Dartmouth, both some faculty in the engineering department, have worked on different modeling to think about the viability of energy access in these kinds of conflict-affected countries. And we've also done some research into the strategic objectives and know that countries like the CAR, Central African Republic, are deeply committed to expanding their own energy access for their population. All right, now on to the discussions. And I will, as I said, moderate, look forward to diverse views here. And I'd like to have opening remarks first by the UAE, Norway, and the government of the Central African Republic, and then we'll turn to the report authors to discuss their findings. So first, let me turn to Fatima Youssef, who is the acting deputy permanent representative of the United Arab Emirates to the United Nations, and one of our hosts for this event for some opening remarks. Over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you for all your great efforts. I hope my voice is clear to everyone.
Yes.
Great. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. On behalf of the Permanent Mission of the UAE to the United Nations, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this virtual event on renewable energy and peace in the Central African Republic. The UAE strongly believes in the importance of renewable energy to mitigate climate change, and we recognize the many additional benefits that come from its deployment. This case study on renewable energy and peace building in the Central African Republic is a compelling example of that. Beyond reducing emissions, there is an important economic case for renewables within the UN peace missions, which is especially welcome in the context of the ongoing UN reform process. And as co-chair of the UN Climate Security Mechanism, we see a clear and vital connection between addressing climate change and peace building. This was specially highlighted in the COP28 UAE Declaration on Climate, relief, recovery, and peace, and is something we championed together with Norway during our term on the Security Council. Beyond the UN, the UAE is working to deliver these commitments on the ground, and we are proud that the UAE company Global South Utilities has recently begun a major solar plant project in the Central African Republic. I also extend my warmest congratulations to the Powering Peace Partners, Energy Peace Partners, the Stimson Center, and the Dickey Center at Dartmouth for this compelling new report, which offers further evidence on the peace dividend from renewable energy. So I want to thank also all the representatives of permanent missions for joining us today, and I hope this report will be useful to you, especially those involved with the UN peace missions. Thank you also to Hans Olav Ibrek and Norway for co-hosting this event with us, and to Ambassador Dr. Nawal Al-Hosseini, our permanent representative to IRENA, for joining us from the UAE. And to colleagues from the Central African Republic, welcome and thank you for joining us from Bangui. I now want to pass the floor back to you, Victoria, and looking forward to the report presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatima, for the welcome. And thank you to you and to Norway for hosting us today. As you noted, I'll next turn to a longtime supporter of this project and a leader in the field, Ambassador Nawal Al-Hosseini, who's the UAE's permanent representative to the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Victoria, Your Excellency, distinguished guests, colleagues, and really, really old friends. It is a privilege to join you today for this launch of this very important report examining the role of renewable energy in peacekeeping settings in Central African Republic. This report sheds light on how sustainable energy solution can contribute not only to peace operations, but also to long-term stability and development in communities affected by conflict. Allow me first also to express our appreciation to the Powering Peace Initiative, a partnership between the Stimson Center, Energy Peace Partners, and the Dickey Center for International Understanding at the Dartmouth College for their dedicated and insightful work. When we speak about renewable energy in post-conflict peacekeeping context, we speak not only of power systems and infrastructure. We are speaking of hope, dignity, and the foundations for inclusive, resilient societies. The Central African Republic remains one of the least electrified countries in the world. Scaling renewable energy in such contexts holds immense potential. It can reduce operational cost for peacekeeping missions, foster self-sufficiency, and create lasting benefits for host communities well beyond the lifetime of the mission. In short, it offers an opportunity to align peacekeeping efforts with sustainable development and climate objectives. This report clearly outlines both the opportunities and the challenges before us. It underscores that progress in this area cannot come from one actor alone. It requires coordinated partnerships among the United Nations system, member states and donors, national authorities, the private sector, and financial institutions. The United Arab Emirates is proud to support the Energy Compact on Renewable Energy in Peacekeeping Operations introduced at the High-Level Dialogue on Energy in 2021. Our shared ambition is clear: to ensure that renewable energy deployed in peacekeeping missions benefits mission self and, importantly, extends outward to support and empower local communities. This is not merely an aspiration. It is a commitment to leave behind more than temporary infrastructure, to build skills, capacity, and market conditions that enable long-term stability, opportunity, and well-being. We must, of course, acknowledge the realities. Peacekeeping missions operate in complex and difficult environments, yet the benefits of the clean energy solutions, reduced fuel dependency, lower cost, strengthened resilience, are compelling and transformative. The path forward will require persistence, innovation, and partnership. But together, governments, international organizations, private sector partners, and communities, we can translate ambition into practical progress on the ground. I look forward to discussion today and to working collectively on the next steps that can transform the insights of this report into concrete action. Because when we bring peace and energy together, we do more than power homes. We help power a more hopeful, peaceful, and sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Very much appreciate your remarks. I'll turn now to our other co-host and a pioneer in this field, Norway's Special Envoy for Climate and Security, Hans Olav Ibrak. Hans Olav, over to you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Excellencies and colleagues, it's a privilege to participate in this event today, launching a report focusing on the transformative potential of renewable energy in the Central African Republic. And let me build on Dr. Nawal's excellent framing remarks, and also let me acknowledge the UAE's leadership in this area. So in the interest of time, let me focus on three issues. I'm not going to dive into the specificities of this report and outlining some of the challenges that you are faced with in the Central African Republic and in MINUSCA. So let me offer sort of three more general points. First, investments in clean or renewable energy is increasing globally, and thanks to the UAE and the outcome of COP28, we know where we need to go. The direction of travel is quite clear. We need to transition out of fossil fuel, and we need to then expand renewable energy and improve energy efficiency as quickly as possible. But even though investments are increasing, we also know that there are regional differences, and also geopolitics have affected supply chains, investments, and international cooperation. As a result, investments in renewable energy in conflict-affected and developing countries is far below what is needed. Africa, for instance, receives less than 1% of global renewable energy financing the last few years. Last year, only 4 gigawatt of renewable energy was installed in Africa out of the nearly 600 gigawatt globally. And that number really reflects that we need to scale up what we do in Africa. Institutional barriers, insecurity, and weak governance continue to slow progress. And these gaps are not just financial, they are moral and strategic. The second point that I would like to address is deploying renewable energy within peacekeeping missions present a variety of benefits, and Dr. Nawal has already mentioned most of these. First, it improves operational resilience. It reduces reliance on imported diesel, which is costly, logistically complex, and vulnerable to disruption. Secondly, it reduces cost and environmental impacts. It mitigates deforestation by offering alternatives to biomass for cooking, for instance. It also strengthens local economies and supports the delivery of essential services, which will also leave behind a tangible legacy of peace and development. Thirdly, we must reframe renewable energy as integral to national security, early recovery, and peace building, not just a development priority. Before conflict, we could reframe renewables as national security and peace priorities, because renewables can be used to reduce resource tensions. During conflict, we need to prioritize off-grid and community-led renewable solutions, and we need to equip peacekeeping missions with clean, decentralized energy systems. After conflicts, we could use renewables to build economies, trust, livelihoods, and reconciliation around renewable power. In closing, renewable energy is a bridge between climate action, stability, and peace. With political will, innovative financing, and strong partnerships, it can become a cornerstone of resilience and sustainable development in fragile contexts. I'm looking forward to hear more of the report and also the responses to our colleagues on the report. Thank you.
Hans Olav, thank you so much. You really laid out the very interdisciplinary challenges, but also the benefits of such a transition, and very much appreciate your work in this field. Excellent. So thank you again. And next, I'd like to turn to Mr. Bruno Serge Bagodo, who is the Director of Studies, Statistics, and Planning at the Central African Republic's Ministry of Energy. So this is the moment where, if you are not fluent in French and you'd like to hear this in another language, remember you can go down and click on the More button, and then go to Interpretation, and then pick the language that you wish to hear. So with that, Sir, may I turn to you to offer your remarks? Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Bonsoir à tout le monde. Bonsoir à tous ceux qui sont disponibles pour cette réunion. En fait, je suis Bruno Serge Bakoutou, je suis au ministère du Développement de l'Énergie et des Ressources hydrauliques. Je suis le directeur des... Je vais présenter de manière brève le secteur de l'énergie et son potentiel en énergie. Alors, en ce qui concerne les données démographiques, tout le monde sait bien, nous avons une superficie de 6 km et une population de 5,7 millions en 2023, avec un PIB de 496 dollars et une consommation moyenne d'électricité par habitant de 32 kWh. À nos jours, la capacité installée en 2024 en hydro, nous avons 30 mégawatts, provient de sources de Boili 1 et Boili 2. En Boili, il est 10 mégawatts, Boili 2, 20. Solaire, nous avons 41,8 mégas, avec Sakai 15 mégas, Danzi 25, et les deux centrales hybrides dans les villes de Berberati et Bambari de 1,8. En ce qui concerne le taux d'accès, c'est vous voyez le taux d'accès des populations à l'électricité en 2019, avoisine 14%, et jusqu'en 2023, ça fait 17,6. Et en ce qui concerne les lignes haute tension, moyenne tension et basse tension, nous avons 384 km pour les haute tension et moyenne tension, 683 km pour la basse tension. Les tarifs d'électricité en République centrafricaine tournent autour de 15 dollars kilowattheure. En ce qui concerne le mix énergétique, vous voyez sur l'écran, le solaire occupe 22%, contre une petite portion d'hydro, parce que présentement, si nous raisonnons en termes de mix, le solaire est en train de prendre le devant de l'hydroélectricité, alors que nous avons vraiment des potentialités en hydroélectricité. Les coupures récurrentes depuis 2021 tournent autour de 80, en termes de nombres, 193, 2022, 492, 2023, 469, 2024, 754, avec une durée de 35 heures en 2021, 105 en 2022, 110 en 2023 et 119 en 2024. En ce qui concerne les défis, nous avons l'alimentation électrique insuffisante pour répondre aux besoins des consommateurs, parce que la production thermique représente 2% du mix énergétique en raison de coûts d'exploitation élevés. Nous avons aussi le potentiel hydroélectrique estimé à plus de 2000 MWh, mais sous-exploité. Dans les 2000 MWh disponibles, nous avons seulement 30 de Boili 1 et Boili 2. En ce qui concerne le vieillissement des infrastructures du réseau, nous voulons la modernisation ou bien le développement ou le renforcement des infrastructures de production, transport, distribution. Nous avons aussi la faible performance des sociétés de l'ENERCA, avec une perte technique et commerciale qui tourne autour de 40%, avec un cadre institutionnel inadéquat et incomplet, car les agences telles que l'Agence de régulation et suivi de l'électrification rurale a été supprimée en 2021, rattachée au département. Mais nous sommes en train de réviser la loi sur le code de l'électricité. Le consultant international suggéré qu'on puisse restaurer, amener ces deux agences-là en place, parce que l'agence de régulation, c'est le gendarme, c'est la colonne vertébrale du ministère. Nous avons aussi la faible participation du secteur privé. C'est pourquoi nous avons, avec l'appui de la Banque mondiale et de la BAD, nous a aidé à élaborer le pacte national de l'énergie qui est en cohérence avec la vision et les ambitions du pays. S'agissant de garantir l'accès à une énergie abordable, fiable, inclusive, durable et propre pour toute la population centrafricaine. S'agissant de l'alignement stratégique, ce pacte est aligné sur le plan national du développement 2024-2028, qui est validé en septembre 2024 avec l'objectif de développement des Nations Unies. Nous avons projeté nos indicateurs en 2030 comme accès à l'électricité, 50%, accès aux cuissons propres, 30%, avec 90% de capacité de production à partir des sources d'énergie renouvelables. Cela va permettre d'éviter les émissions de gaz à effet de serre à hauteur de 17 644 giga COD équivalent. En besoin de financement, nous avons besoin pour la mise en œuvre de ce pacte d'énergie, nous avons besoin de 1,7 milliard de dollars américains, soit 1,051 milliards de francs CFA, dont 30%, soit 314,5 millions de dollars américains qui devraient venir du secteur privé. Avec impact à long terme, pour l'amélioration des moyens de subsistance des ménages, de la qualité de vie et de la productivité économique, et le renforcement des secteurs de base dans un contexte fragile, l'amélioration des situations sécuritaires. Comme principaux résultats, augmentation de l'accès à l'électricité, 50% d'ici 2030, avec une progression de 65%. Situation de cuisson, solution aux cuissons propres, nous voulons augmenter ce volet à 30% d'ici 2030, avec 10% de la population utilisant des combustibles modernes de cuisson propre tels que les méthanes, les gaz, les biogaz, etc. En ce qui concerne les parts des énergies renouvelables, 90% du mix énergétique, 285 MW de capacité additionnelle, dont 135 pour les réseaux interconnectés et 150 pour les centrales isolées. En ce qui concerne les capitaux privés mobilisés, 314 milliards, environ 523 millions de dollars américains. Mais à l'heure actuelle, les données, ces données sont insignifiantes. Et pour en finir avec l'accès à l'électricité de 2030, avec les types de raccordement, bien sûr, nous avons dit nombre de ménages ayant accès à l'électricité sur l'extension et densification des réseaux d'ici 2030, 247 265 habitants contre 159 en 2024, avec mini-réseau 180 000 contre 1700. Vous voyez, l'écart est énorme. Et pour le système solaire autonome, nous avons voulu atteindre 130. Nous souhaitons atteindre 130 contre 2800 à l'heure actuelle, pour un total de 557 en 2030 contre 164 320 en 2024. Pour le nombre d'habitants ayant accès à l'électricité, avec la densification, l'extension et densification des réseaux, en 2030, nous souhaitons atteindre 1 483 590 contre 958 932 en 2024. Et les mini-réseaux, 1 800 000 contre 10 200 à l'heure actuelle, et un système solaire isolé de 780 contre 16 800 pour un total de 3 343 en 2030 contre 985 932 en 2024. Voilà de manière succincte la situation du secteur de l'énergie en République centrafricaine. Je vous remercie.
Well, thank you so much for the scene setter for us. And I'm really struck that you have strategic alignment and ambitious goals, but that access to energy appears to be under 17%. And you say that private sector investment is quote unquote insignificant. So I think that's a really important thing to both show the ambition and the analysis you provided as we head into the report. So thank you so much for joining us and giving this perspective. I think everybody would be interested in your slides. All right. Well, thank you all. I'm now going to turn to our report authors to kick off the conversation. Again, it's called the Renewable Energy and Peace in the Central African Republic, an opportunity for the United Nations to lead by example. As far as we know, it's the first study of its kind to look at the energy sector, how it intersects with conflict, looks at renewable energy as a creative entry point, and also thinks about how emissions such as MINUSCA could meet or exceed its ability to support its mandate by a greater shift from diesel to renewables, and as well as how to work with other actors ranging from the country team, UNDP, the government, private sector, and international organizations. So to kick things off, I'd like to welcome my colleague, Dave Mazurski, who's president of Energy Peace Partners, to set the scene for the report. And then in turn, he will hand off to the two lead authors, Romain Esmanjad, who's associate researcher at the French Institute of Geopolitics, and Sophie Rutenbar, non-resident scholar at the Center for International Cooperation at New York University. Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tori, and welcome, Excellencies and colleagues. I'm pleased to be with you today to present our latest report on the CAR. Over the last few years, our Powering Peace initiative has published numerous reports, including 5 country case studies on the DRC, Mali, Somalia, South Sudan, and now Central African Republic, looking at different aspects of renewable energy in fragile and conflict-affected countries, the role of energy in peacekeeping, and the potential and opportunities for those missions to transition to renewables. We have found time and again that renewable energy can offer operational benefits for missions. It's a cheaper and cleaner alternative to the status quo reliance on diesel generators, and it can help address some of the largest pain points for missions in remote and hard-to-access settings, such as the CAR, where the sustained delivery of diesel fuel for generators is among the most difficult, costly, and vulnerable aspects of peacekeeping missions. We found this to be the case for MINUSCA, just as we did for the missions in South Sudan, Somalia, Mali, and DRC. We've also found that transitioning to renewable energy can offer strategic opportunities for missions, development partners, and host governments. In the CAR, which has one of the lowest electrification rates in the world at just under 17%, electricity access is highly concentrated in and around the capital of Bangui. For the least electrified parts of the country, such as the Northeast, the lack of electrification is part of the political and economic marginalization that has contributed to cycles of conflict. Investing in clean energy projects presents an opportunity which can serve both MINUSCA and the wider peace efforts in the country. We found that MINUSCA uses almost 20% of all fuel in the country and 23% of all energy generated. The mission is actively working on expanding its use of renewables from the current 3% to a target of 8 or 9% by the end of the year. But like all peacekeeping missions, it's hampered by a lack of expertise and by its mandate. It was not designed to be in the electricity business. MINUSCA is further challenged by an undersized and under-resourced engineering department when compared to other similar-sized missions. Yet MINUSCA is uniquely placed to drive this forward, given its size, energy needs, and geographic distribution across the country. There are creative solutions, such as power purchase agreements, that can leverage the UN's purchasing power to partner with the private sector to help bring new projects to life. But it will take the active support of the UN country team and other development partners, many of whom have explicit commitments to renewable energy in the country, to turn this opportunity into real projects. In concert with the UAE and Norway, our Powering Peace research and joint events have generated high-level interest from member states and host governments alike. But much more must be done to see this idea implemented at scale and to capture the win-win potential of distributed renewable energy deployment to benefit both missions and host communities. With that, it's my pleasure to hand over to the report's lead authors, Romain Esmanjot and Sophie Rutenbar, to go deeper on the key findings, analysis, and recommendations from the report. Romain, over to you.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Raman, sorry, I think you're speaking only to one channel, possibly. Let me remove it so you can speak, and then I'll change it back later. Apologies, everyone.
Thank you. I think it should now be back on track.
Sorry, please.
I guess I should not go back to the beginning, but just go on, right?
Yeah, sorry, I think you can continue.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with my first point that relates to the roots of the crisis. So, I mean, obviously, there's no time for me to dig into the details of the roots of the crisis and discuss all of them. But there's consensus among the observers and researcher community that one of the key drivers of the conflict is the marginalization of the peripheries and the weakness of the state in those areas. What it means is that since independence, there have been limited effort to develop infrastructure and public services in those areas, which has fed a strong feeling of marginalization and frustration for populations living in those peripheries. This issue of shortage of infrastructure and access to public energies and public services, is actually valid for the entire country, but it's even more acute in some areas like the northwest, the northeast, or the east of the country. And it's not by chance that it's in those very areas that we've seen armed groups emerging in the last 20 years. These armed groups, members and their leaders, they have a number of motivations, and one of them is, of course, controlling natural resources, which help them generate revenues. But this feeling of frustration and of abandonment within local populations have helped them build some legitimacy, appear as their spokesperson, and actually help them for recruitment purposes also. So among those groups that have emerged, one of them is the Silica Coalition that was created in the Northeast in 2012 and took power in 2013, leading to violence in the country and, in fact, to the outbreak of the crisis that the country, the Central African Republic, is still trying to exit today. What's interesting is that in all agreements that have been signed since then, there have been calls for a more balanced and equal development among regions, and that's the case with the February 2019 Khartoum Agreement, for instance. There have been some progress in the implementation of those agreements, and in particular, some armed groups have lost ground in the last few years, but more limited progress in terms of fighting against this feeling of marginalization and having more balance in access to public services in general. So that's still a strong, I think, issue of concern in the Central African Republic, and something to work on if we want to get out of the current crisis and prevent new ones. So now, moving to the second message, what can we do about this issue of marginalization? One key area of work is to work on energy precisely. Why? Is because the unbalanced distribution of services, which I just discussed, is valid also for energy and energy access. So I'm going to ask colleagues to put on a map of the country on the screen. We actually did a survey of existing energy infrastructure and production in the Central African Republic, as well as planned projects. And what you should be able to see is that existing production facilities, and most of the planned ones, are in the southern part of the country and the west southwest, much less in the east and the northeast. In fact, in the report, we also did develop a few case studies on three locations: Sibut in the center, Boar in the west, and Vele in the north. So what those case studies show is that energy access is a struggle for all people in the Central African Republic. It's an impediment to development and stability, but it's even more clearer and stronger in Vele in the north. So on this basis, the argument that we make is that increasing electricity production and distribution and a balanced distribution in the country would help address political grievances, strengthen resilience for local population, and create economic opportunities. I mean, it's easy to understand how access to energy is a multiplier of opportunities, initiatives, and entrepreneurship in the economic sector. Of course, there are different reasons for this imbalance that you can see on the map. One reason is the fact that you have more population density in the south and the west of the country, so more needs to access to energy. These areas are also a bit more secure, so it's easier for people to implement projects in those areas. But the argument we want to make is that it's important to solve the current crisis and prevent future ones, also to look at the so-called remote areas, including the northeast, where armed groups like the Seleka coalition have emerged in recent years. I think the map is no longer needed now, and moving to my third and last point on what can we do to boost energy access in the Central African Republic. I think we heard that from the representative of the CAR government. There is a very significant potential in renewables in the country, potentially in electricity in the south, in the west, and to an extent in the northwest, and then potential in solar energy in the entire country, including, and that's important, in the marginalized areas of the northeast and the east. So there is big potential. Also, with regard to hydroelectric energy, there is expertise and know-how in the Central African Republic since the 1970s. Energy has been produced through the Boali Dam. But what's really missing is certainly some political will, but also investment and money at the moment. And certainly a need to boost the private sector in the country. And that's why one of our recommendations is precisely to create an atmosphere conducive to more investment from the private sector, including through public-private partnership. So I'll leave it at that, hoping that I made it clear that renewables do have a great potential in the CR, potential to boost energy access and the stabilization process. And now I'll let Sophie explain what the UN can do about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Romain. I feel like the groundwork has been laid well by previous speakers, so I'll just touch on some key areas that sort of respond to what they've said and move towards some specifics for the UN. So first of all, I'll briefly overview the challenges facing MINUSCA, and then also go into the opportunities offered by renewable energy in terms of addressing the challenges that MINUSCA is dealing with. And then I'll briefly touch on the rest of the UN system as well as the role that other international partners can play. So first of all, MINUSCA has been deployed in the Central African Republic for more than a decade, since 2014. As of this past June, close to 19,000 military, police, and personnel and civilian staff members were deployed across CAR in dozens of bases with a budget of over $1 billion. In 2023 to 2024, as Dave mentioned, the mission's annual diesel usage accounted for about 18.6% of all fuel use in the country. So this reflects the mission size, but also the level of underdevelopment, as Romain has overviewed. I'm going to make one key point that MINUSCA's reliance on diesel fuel undermines its operational effectiveness and mandate implementation. MINUSCA is reliant on generators because there's a lack of available local power in quantities sufficient to support its size. 78% of diesel used by the mission was used for generators between 2023 and 2024. In Bangui, the centralization of the country also results in a centralization of MINUSCA. There's a concentration of personnel, resources, and fuel there. The size of the mission in Bangui across several different bases is large enough that it would overload the local grid if it tried to connect. So the mission provides all of its own power in Bangui via generators, although it has made progress in installing some renewable energy to supplement the generator power. Outside Bangui, conditions are even more difficult. And I'll ask Zan, could you please put up the slide of the MINUSCA deployment? Zan? Thank you. Outside Bangui, the mission maintains dozens of camps, many in very remote areas. The most remote camps, and you can see some of them here on the map, for instance, Birao in the far north and Obo in the far east. These specific camps have supply lines that measure well over 1,000 kilometers long through very, very difficult terrain using infrastructure that is often degraded or even non-existent to the point where MINUSCA has to build bridges in order to cross certain rivers after they've been knocked down during the previous rainy season. So it cannot be overstated how challenging, and we'll hear more from MINUSCA colleagues themselves in a minute, but it cannot be overstated how challenging the conditions are for MINUSCA to operate in this country. But as a result of kind of these difficulties, MINUSCA has to deal with very, very long supply lines. Fuel comes in from either the river during the rainy season or across the Cameroon border, and then it has to be distributed throughout the country using these very challenging routes. This is quite a burden on the mission's logistical resourcing. It's also a challenge for the mission's engineering staff. I think MINUSCA is well aware of the challenges that this places on them and would like to increase its use of renewable resources. How at the same time, MINUSCA was established with a level of engineering resources that are insufficient for the number of civilian and military and police personnel that they have to support. It has the lowest ratio of these personnel among any large peacekeeping mission. This goes back a long way to kind of the assumptions on which the mission was founded. And as a result, the engineering personnel in MINUSCA are frequently have difficulty going beyond just sort of maintaining the basics and keeping the generators running to actually being able to advance the mission's infrastructure and infrastructure in the country in order to kind of make the mission's support role easier. So these challenges, the heavy use of generators, the fact that generators require significant fuel resources using very difficult kind of supply lines, have been acknowledged by both the mission and the Security Council. In mission mandate renewals, the Security Council has acknowledged the goal of expanded renewable energy use in missions to enhance safety and security, save costs, offer efficiencies, and benefit the mission. The mission also recognizes the value of switching to renewable energy, including the likely logistical, administrative, and substantive benefits of an increase in renewables. These include reducing fuel consumption, reducing the mission's logistical burden, and freeing up capacities, including uniformed logistical and engineering capacities for other purposes, and advancing mandate implementation by helping improve local electrification. So, in contrast to MINUSCA's reliance on diesel fuel, there is a very clear opportunity in that by reducing its use of diesel fuel, by expanding its use of renewable energy, MINUSCA will make its life easier and will make it more effective in kind of a very challenging context. So these efforts are underway, but the challenges that extend to MINUSCA's operations in the country also affect its efforts to implement new renewable energy projects. So we'll hear more from MINUSCA in a moment about kind of the current status of their efforts. But what we found in speaking in Bangui and around to colleagues is that the mission has some very clear plans that it has tried to implement, but is trying to is making difficult progress in implementing them. So one note, there's a challenge for MINUSCA in that it has to deal with UN regulations that are applicable worldwide. And not to go into kind of a great deal of technical detail for everyone, but the UN has much more control over the generators, the equipment that it owns and operates, and less control or more indirect control over the equipment that is operated by military and police contingents deployed across Central African Republic. So for the UN-owned equipment, the UN is in the process of building more solar and expanding that solar to remote duty stations across Central African Republic. But local capacity is limited, and the mission's engineering capacity is insufficient, which means that deployment of new solar plans is slow, I'm sure much slower than the mission would like. On the other hand, contingent-owned equipment is more difficult to control than UN-owned equipment, and is not always sort of top of the line, although I know the environment team is present on the site of MINUSCA, and they do inspections and work to sort of make sure that contingent equipment meets the UN standards and is as sustainable as possible. There are three routes to kind of scale up these two sides of the coin in terms of UN-owned equipment and contingent-owned equipment. One, the UN is in the process of trialing some projects with different contingents to increase their use of renewable energy and transition to them to more sustainable and more effective energy resources. And I expect we'll hear some more about that from MINUSCA in a second. And then on the whole, the UN is working to increase the availability of renewable energy resources worldwide by implementing new global systems contracts that basically allow offices in countries like Central African Republic, where the local contracting resources are quite limited, to be able to access global contracting resources in order to kind of advance renewable energy. So, and the third modality that Dave mentioned is power purchasing agreements. And MINUSCA has been pushing this forward. It has been sort of a years-long process, but finally last year initiated a power purchasing agreement solicitation for two camps within MINUSCA. And I am looking forward to an update from them on the process of this. And the advantage of power purchasing agreements is that it is essentially leveraging the power of the market in order to for MINUSCA to buy energy from the market And the contractor also has the option of providing power to local communities, which advances MINUSCA's mandate by contributing to improvement of local development, as Ramon was saying. So just to kind of quickly go into the rest of the UN, MINUSCA is by far the largest player in the UN in Central African Republic. But there is also what we call the UN country team. These are sort of around 20 UN agencies, funds, and programs which are active around the country and doing, tasks such as supporting international development. The UN Development Program is there, working with children, UNICEF, and supporting food and agricultural efforts with the World Food Program and FAO. So these UN funds and agencies, funds, and programs face very similar challenges to MINUSCA in terms of the difficulties of bringing in fuel and the challenges of kind of dealing with the difficult infrastructure in the country. However, the UNCT is smaller in size and has fewer human resources and lower capacity. So the UNCT has been working on integration, so basically trying to combine together to maximize the resources available to them and mitigating the kind of risks of any disruption. So in terms of kind of recommendations, we wanted to just highlight sort of three main ones, building on kind of the findings that I've tried to present in brief. So first of all, one recommendation to MINUSCA, as well as to kind of international partners in the UN system in general, is to prioritize the deployment of renewable energy, including through increased collaboration with the CAR government, the UN country team, and other international partners. This goes to the kind of points previously raised about sort of the value of renewable energy in the CAR context, as well as the difficulties of operations in the country. Second, to consider measures to reduce diesel dependence and increase the resilience and sustainability of remote MINUSCA bases, like Birao and Obo, which I highlighted earlier. These locations, because of their distance, because of their underdevelopment, because of the lack of availability of really any local resources, are prime targets for installing renewable energy resources, which would make them more resilient, more sustainable. And I know the mission has taken some efforts in these areas. They are the most challenging places to access and therefore the most challenging places to implement renewable energy projects, but at the same time, the rewards are the greatest available. And then finally, just to note that the role of international partners is critical in all of this. Even if power purchasing agreement efforts are concluded and set up, which we hope they will be soon, then the role of the international community is, including UN agencies, is critical in terms of leveraging these MINUSCA projects to benefit the local communities by extending electricity resources to them. So the international community has a role to play, the UN country team has a role to play, but most of all, the mission, MINUSCA, has a really key role to play in terms of extending renewable energy benefits across the country. Okay, back to you, Tori.
Thank you so much to really talk about the strategic opportunity, the need for access. You can quickly go into the details of how UN missions work, but I appreciate that you can also lift up and say that while the mission has a big role to play, it absolutely needs partners and it cannot do it by itself, but it's such an opportunity. So thank you. All right, we have some fantastic, a few more speakers. I'm just going to turn briefly to Andrew Hyde, who's a senior fellow at the Stimson Center, who himself has been working in this area as well as with data. And then we'll turn to two more perspectives, including from MINUSCA, before we turn to Q&A. So Andrew Hyde, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Tori, and thank you, Sophie and Romain, for outlining the main findings of your report. Very useful. I just want to sort of say a couple brief things related to the reports. Our team has produced, as Dave said, 5 of these case studies over the past 6 years, demonstrating how renewable energy can be incorporated into UN peacekeeping operations. It also, as the other reports have, spotlighted the role renewable energy can play in increasing energy access across CAR and how that can address the potential for conflict. In our view, they have contributed to a fundamental shift in the attitude of UN peacekeeping and many member states about the importance and feasibility of renewable energy, not just for environmental purposes, but also to address fragility and conflict dynamics. Unfortunately, this report comes at a time of immense financial strain on the resources available to UN peacekeeping. The US, as the largest single contributor to the UN, has paused payments to the UN for a number of accounts, including UN peacekeeping. There is some cause for optimism that at least some of those payments will soon resume after the current US government shutdown. The lack of these funds and delayed payments by other large contributors for UN peacekeeping has necessitated drastic measures to address the yawning fiscal gap. Early last month, the UN announced that it would cut a quarter of peacekeepers in 9 operations around the world. MINUSCA, unfortunately, will be one of those missions affected. This comes in the context of the UN 80 reform agenda launched by Secretary General Guterres. This initiative seeks to detail how the UN can adapt to become more agile, integrated, and equipped to respond to today's complex global challenges amid tightening resources. It aims to make the UN more responsive and resilient, better equipped to serve the people whose lives depend on it, more accountable to the taxpayers who underwrite its work, and more supportive of staff in their critical roles. All this to say, of course, that these are challenging times, and we are fully cognizant of the change coming to UN peacekeeping. In fact, the UN Peacekeeping Ministerial in Berlin last May also took notice of the need to evolve UN peacekeeping for a new era of conflict and instability and called for fresh and innovative thinking on peace operations. Of course, the work we are here to discuss today fully aligns, I believe, with these twin realities. Increased UN peacekeeping use of renewable energy demonstrates not only good environmental stewardship, but a commitment to mission resiliency and agility. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. It's useful to get a bigger perspective, but I want to thank you, Dave, Romain, and Sophie for their really fantastic work. I think the report is extremely rich, and you've just touched on some of the analysis and your recommendations. So it's a perfect transition now for the next section, and we're welcoming views from MINUSCA itself. I'd like to bring in Paulos Demisi, the Chief Engineer at MINUSCA. Paulos, are you with us? I know that you have the difficult job of making sure that the mission has power, the mission can operate even in the most remote settings, which we've just been hearing about, with difficult supply chains, and making also an effort to expand access to renewable energy for the mission and to meet your mandate. Can you tell us a bit more about how things are going? What are the challenges and opportunities you see? And what more can be done? And where do you need help? Over to you, please. I think you're still on mute if there's a way to, or maybe UAE could unmute him. It might be the computer that we're watching that is muted. So we'll just give our colleague a moment to work out the technical difficulty here. There we go.
Hello. Yeah, you can hear me now, yeah?
Yes, we can. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Victoria, and everybody. My name is Paulos Demisi. I'm the Chief Engineer of MINUSCA, and I'm accompanied by 2 staff members. To my left is Sahong Flan. She's the Chief of our environmental unit, and also Ahmed Fora. He is our the Chief of Electromechanical Unit, who is dealing mainly on the implementation of our renewable energy initiatives. Mostly Sophie has, raised most of the MINUSCA's, renewable energy initiatives, but I'll try to quickly go through, whatever we have done and, give you some figures. So MINUSCA has an annual electricity demand of approximately 50 gigawatt hour, which is provided through the UNOE, United Nations owned equipment, the missions equipment, as well as the contingent owned equipment, most of which, 97% of our energy demand is produced from diesel generators, and only a nominal portion is derived from renewable energy, around 3%. So in order to increase its renewable energy share, MINUSCA is pursuing different strategies through projects led by the mission and other programs led by UN partners active in the energy sector in the Central African Republic. So just to give you some of the strategies that the mission is undertaking. We have got three categories of implementing these projects. One is in-house implementation of in-house projects, the renewable energy project, but these ones are very, very small, 50 to 300 kilowatt peak. We are buying these solar panels from the headquarters global system contract and installing these the systems by our in-house team. But their the impact is very, very, very small. So it doesn't pick up the mission renewable share. The second one, which we are trying to implement, is using another HQ global systems contract. This is a turnkey the contract which can produce from 300 to 1 megawatt peak. Last year, the P25, we had a budget for implementation of this project, but due to liquidity the issue, as you are all aware, we were not able to implement this project. The other one which we are also planning to do is through the power purchase agreement, where we have started the solicitation process and inviting other investors to implement in the renewable energy sector, especially what we have we have chosen 2 locations in Bria and Boer, and the solicitation process started in August, and now it is under the final solicitation stage. And we are requesting to launch this project. We are requesting the government to provide us some additional land next to our deployment area. If this project is implemented, our renewable energy share can go up to 13%, which is a big peak from what we are currently having in the mission, which is around 3%. So the other avenue which we are looking is partner-led projects, which are we are undertaking under 2 categories. The first one is the power purchase agreement or leasing. This is the partner-led power purchase agreements and are developed under the public-private partnership framework, usually supported by the World Bank. This has been implemented in South Sudan and Somalia. These projects have a very high impact for the UN, high renewable energy, renewable electricity, with no initial capital investment. And the second one is using the government's utility grid. So the progress under this partners-led projects, so renewable projects under INERCA, World Bank, and private partners in Bambari, Bangasu, Bosangwa, and Birao. So they could be providing more renewable energy power access for the mission. And the other avenue is the recently renewable energy plant in Danzi and Sakai have strengthened Bangis grid that will offer MINUSCA the potential to connect to a nearly 100% renewable supply to the mission. So as Sophie has mentioned, we have got so many difficult challenges in implementing of our renewable energy plan. The first one is the logistical challenge. Throughout this country, there is no roads. Even if we wanted to implement, there is a logistical nightmare. And there is 8 months of rain, only 4 months of operating the dry season. So even if we wanted to implement some projects, logistically implementing of projects is difficult. And the second one, as Sophia has said, we are very, very short-staffed. We don't have in the engineering section skilled manpower, for implementing of this renewable energy the projects. And also there is the big one is funding issue. As I've mentioned before, there is the current liquidity challenge that the organization is facing. So even if we have got some plans to implement, and we didn't have funding to implement these projects. And the other one, which Sophie has already even mentioned about COE generators. This is the contingent owned generators, which are we find it very difficult to control, and also these generators are not energy efficient. Even if we are implementing some projects, renewable energy from our end, COE generators, create some difficulties in not helping us to increase our renewable energy, portion. I know under the COE manual, TCCs and PCCs are encouraged to deploy solar plants, but it's not happening over here. That would have, if TCCs, PCCs come up with their solar plants or some energy efficient generators, that could have contributed in lowering our diesel consumption. So that's what I wanted to say. If there are, I know this is a very, very wide area. If there are any comments coming or questions coming, we will be happy to answer them. And over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulos. I think I can speak for everybody that we appreciate your laying out the ability you have to both do in-house projects, the work on PPAs, and your eagerness to have partners for new approaches, but also your candid assessment of the challenging infrastructure, being short-staffed, the funding issues, and then also the quality of some of the COE equipment. I think you have people who are ready to work with you across the board. So thank you very much. I'm going to next turn to our final speaker. But before I do, I'd like to encourage him and all of you to once again go to more and check on interpretation so that you can hear, I think that our colleague, Dr. Michel Bindo, who's the project manager at the UN Development Program in the Central African Republic, will be speaking in French. So Dr. Michel, very much grateful for you joining us. You're the final commenter, and we turn to Q&A, so the floor is yours. Sir, I just want to double check that you're unmuted, so people can hear you. There, it looks better.
Je suis suivi.
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
OK. Mesdames et messieurs, je prends la parole pour présenter notre contribution à ce grand événement consacré à l'énergie et paix en RCA. Tout d'abord, je m'en vais vous présenter la caractérisation de la situation en République centrafricaine. En RCA, les taux d'accès à l'énergie sont très faibles. 8% de la population a accès à l'électricité.
The energy access is very low in the country, with only 8% of the population having access to electricity, 0.9 having access to clean fuel and cooking technology. At the moment, the biomass is still the main energy source, accounting for 98% of the country's energy balance. Despite the high potential in water resources, the lack of access to electricity means that only 30% of the population has access to drinking water.
Les conflits récurrents que le pays a connus ont eu pour
The recurrent
conséquence
conflicts in the country have resulted in
et la
looting
destruction des centres de production secondaire
and the
d'électricité
destruction of
et leurs réseaux
electricity
sur le territoire.
production centers in the country,
Malgré
as
les
well
efforts
as
que
their
ne cesse de
networks
déployer le
in
gouvernement
all regions.
et ses partenaires, le secteur de l'énergie,
In spite of the efforts of the government and its partners, the energy sector
territoire. Les nouvelles installations sont destinées aux besoins croissants de consommation de Bangui, la capitale, et ne suffisent pas pour alimenter le reste du pays, tant le
Bangui,
coût de développement des réseaux de
and
transport
they're
est
not
exorbitant.
enough to supply the rest of the country, as the cost
L'électricité,
of
au lieu d'être un
developing
instrument de
transmission
développement
networks
social
is
et
very high.
socio-économique, est devenue dans ces conditions
Electricity
produit de luxe,
in this
une
situation
rupture de la
has become a
cohésion sociale,
luxury
car
product
désormais
and
destiné à ceux
a
qui ont les
factor
moyens
in the breakdown of social cohesion instead of being an instrument for social and socio-economic
Slide suivante.
development. Next slide, please.
Quel est le rôle de l'énergie dans la stabilisation et le développement
What is the role
de la
of
RCA?
energy in the stabilization and the
Il nous
development of the
souvient
Central African
tous
Republic?
qu'il est connu que
It is
l'obscurité est
well
un
known
vecteur de stress,
that
d'angoisse,
darkness is a factor
d'inquiétude,
of
d'insécurité,
stress,
par voie
anxiety,
de
worry, and
conséquence,
insecurity,
d'absence de paix, car
and
il
therefore
favorise et
it
grandit les violeurs,
contributes
les
to
rebelles,
the
les guerriers.
absence of peace and make the life
Grâce
of
à l'éclairage
bandits and
public
thieves
qu'elle
easier.
procure, l'énergie participe à la stabilisation de
Thanks
la
to
sécurité des populations,
public lightning
à la
it
libre
provides,
circulation des biens
the energy
et
can
des
contribute to the
Au-delà
stabilization
de la satisfaction des
and
besoins
to
familiaux,
people's security,
l'accès
as
des
well
femmes à
as the
l'énergie
free movement
permet de
of goods
créer les
and people.
conditions de leur autonomisation économique
Beyond
et
meeting
contribue
family
à
needs,
l'augmentation de
women's
leur
access to
pouvoir
modern
d'achat
energy creates
par
conditions
les
for their economic
opportunités qu'elle
empowerment
offre,
and
décharge les jeunes filles des charges
contributes
familiales
to
d'assistance à leur
increasing
mère
their
au foyer
purchasing
pour se
power.
consacrer à leur
It relieves
éducation.
young girls from household chores,
L'énergie
allowing
favorise
them
la
to
relance
focus
de
on their
l'économie
education.
locale, car l'énergie produite
Energy also
localement
promotes the revival of the local
servira
economy,
de source de transformation,
as locally produced
devant
energy
motiver les
can
investissements
serve as a
privés
source of
dans les
transformation.
secteurs à fort potentiel de croissance,
It
ainsi que la
encourages private
transformation
investment
et
in
la
high growth
distribution des
potential
produits
sectors,
issus de leur exploitation.
as well as the transportation and
Elle
distribution of
permettra
products
surtout
from their
d'améliorer
operations.
durablement les conditions de vie des populations
Energy
fournissant les
particularly
conditions
helps
de développement
to
des chaînes de
improve the
valeur
living conditions of
dans les
populations
secteurs
by
à
providing the
fort potentiel de
conditions
croissance
for the
que sont les
development
secteurs
of
agropastoral,
high
minier,
potential
forestier,
value
touristique
chains
et les nouvelles technologies
in
pour
the
le
fields
développement.
of agriculture, mining,
La
forestry,
dynamique instaurée par la
or
production de
tourism.
l'énergie électrique favorisera le
The
développement
dynamics
des
created by the
activités
production
génératrices de
of
revenus dans les chaînes de valeur,
energy can promote the
participera à la
development of
réduction
income
des écarts de
generating
développement entre les
activities,
femmes et les hommes et à la lutte contre le chômage des jeunes et des femmes qui
and it
représenteront
can contribute
respectivement
to
30% et 50%
reducing development gaps
des
between
actifs.
women and men
Mais
and
surtout,
combating
elle va
unemployment among
participer à
youth
renforcer
and
les
women.
capacités des communautés à payer les services de l'électricité
It
par
can
voie
help
de conséquence à rentabiliser aussi les
community
installations.
face the cost of
Quel est le rôle de
electricity.
l'énergie dans la stabilisation? Nous proposons une configuration graphique.
We are proposing a diagram to explain what UNDP does. It's in the next slide, please.
Le gouvernement et ses partenaires devront faire de chacune des localités abritant les
The
programmes
government and its
des
partners
pôles de croissance.
needs to
Comme projet
make
intégrateur
all
de
localities
l'énergie,
and transform them
comme
in
le montre la figure
growth hub
suivante,
programs
en milieu rural, pour créer
and
une stratégie de
projects
fédération d'un partenariat énergie et d'une mobilisation
that
des ressources.
establish an integrated
représente
project
ce
centered
graphique?
on energy in rural
Ce
areas.
graphique montre que l'énergie a un grand rôle dans la
The diagram
stabilisation et
shows
le
the
développement
important
du pays.
role that
Il est au
energy can
centre
play
de
in
toute
development
activité.
in the country. It's at the
Il
center
est montré sur ce graphique
of all
que,
activities,
en développant ensemble les activités d'agriculture,
the diagram shows
minier,
that
touristique,
working on all
agro-pastoral
sectors at the same time,
et les nouvelles
agriculture,
technologies,
mines, tourism, new
avec une
technologies,
transformation locale, on favorise le développement des chaînes de valeur,
can help local
on autonomise les
transformation and the
femmes
development of
et on renforce
value
les capacités
chains,
humaines. À côté,
strengthen human
les autres
capacity,
partenaires
and in
intervenant dans
particular
le
boost the role of women.
décentralisation de l'État et les infrastructures d'appui à la croissance, on
It
améliore
helps
les
the
revenus localement
decentralization of the
et
states,
alors on crée le développement local.
which
En
can also, in return,
conclusion,
help
on
local
crée des
development.
emplois pour les jeunes, pour les empêcher
Also,
d'aller s'initier
it creates
dans les
employment
rébellions et la destruction du
for
pays.
the youth, preventing them to join the rebellion and
Quel est le
engage
rôle des
in
Nations
negative
Unies?
activities. What is the
Slide
role of
suivant.
the United Nations? Next slide,
La
please.
MINUSCA doit poursuivre sa mission habituelle de
MINUSCA
sécuriser les
must
déplacements
continue
des équipes
its
de projet
traditional
sur le
mission
site
of
de
securing the
projet.
movement of project teams to project
Mais
sites.
surtout, les agences des systèmes des Nations Unies
More importantly,
et la MINUSCA
UN system
doivent
agencies and
œuvrer
MINUSCA
ensemble et
must
intensifier leurs
work
efforts
together
pour
and
accompagner le
intensify their
gouvernement
efforts to
à
support
adopter un
the
changement
adoption
de
of a
paradigme,
program of
passant
a
de
paradigm
l'aide
shift from
humanitaire
humanitarian
au développement durable et
aid
transformationnel.
to sustainable and
Conformément au
transformative
graphique
development.
précédent, chacune des agences agissant dans son domaine de compétences
And this must be
respectif.
done
Pour la
in
MINUSCA,
accordance with the previous diagram, with each
participer au
agency acting
financement
with its
des
respective
projets
area of
d'énergie
expertise.
nouvelle et renouvelable
For MINUSCA,
qui
participating
seront
in the financing of
laissés aux
renewable energy
communautés,
projects
permettant aux
will
populations
help
bénéficiaires de récolter les dividendes de la paix.
communities
La mise en œuvre de ce graphique
or energy
oblige
projects
désormais
benefiting
que
communities will
les
allow the
efforts soient
beneficiary populations
mutualisés
to reap the
et
dividend of peace.
concentrés dans les zones d'intervention à chaque
The
fois
implementation of this
pour
diagram
promouvoir l'accès à
now
l'électricité
requires that
l'eau
efforts
potable,
be pooled and
l'agroforesterie et
concentrated in
l'agriculture
each
etc.
intervention area to promote
Mesdames et
access
messieurs,
to electricity, drinking water,
en conclusion et
agroforestry,
plaidoyer de notre
and
présentation,
agriculture. Ladies and
je
gentlemen, in conclusion,
fournirai les petits détails suivants.
I want to give
Le
a
PNUD
few additional
développe déjà
details.
des projets dans ce
The
sens.
UNDP is implementing
Premièrement, le
projects at the
projet de
moment
promotion
already.
des petites centrales hydroélectriques marqué par la construction
The project
de
to
la
promote
PCA
small
Gambula,
hydroelectric plants,
capacité
marked by the
300
construction of the
kilowatts,
Gambula small
devant alimenter
hydroelectric
50 000 personnes,
capacity of
dont
300 kilowatts,
51% de femmes. Et
intended
mon
to
plaidoyer
supply
pour ce
50,000 people,
est la recherche de
with
2 millions de dollars
51% of whom are
pour
women.
compléter le financement des travaux de génie
The
civil
project is seeking
et
$2
réaliser les
million
travaux d'évacuation
to
de
complete the
l'énergie.
financial of civil engineering
Ceci
works
est un
and
appel
carry
de
out
notre part.
energy evacuation
Deuxième
work.
point, le projet de promotion de systèmes solaires autonomes en faveur de
The
l'entrepreneuriat
project to
féminin
promote autonomous
avec
solar system
l'installation
for
de 5
women's
mini-centrales
entrepreneurship with the
solaires
installation of 5 mini solar
d'une
plants
capacité de 25 kW
with a
crête
capacity
chacune,
of
soit au total
25
125 kW
kilowatt
crête,
each,
et la dotation d'équipements
the
électriques pour
provision
les
of
activités génératives de
electrical
revenus
equipment
dans
for
2 localités
income
du pays,
generating activities in
dans
2
le centre
localities,
nord et au nord, Ndélé
in
et
Dele
Kagamandou.
and the north,
Le troisième
Dele
projet,
and Kagamandoro in the center
le
and the north.
projet de développement d'un système hybride propre de production d'électricité
Then there's a
basé
project
sur
to develop a
l'hydroélectricité et le
clean
solaire
hybrid
à
electricity
Baoro
production system
avec
based on
200 kW
hydroelectricity
crête
and solar
électrique
energy
et 100
in
kW
Bauru.
crête solaire. Troisième point, le PNUD et l'UNICEF développent un programme conjoint de développement des capacités nationales pour
Third point,
promouvoir la
UNDP and
résilience de
UNICEF are
populations
developing a joint
face à
program
la
for the
vulnérabilité
development of
climatique
national
en République
capacities
centrafricaine,
to promote the
marquée par
resilience of
l'installation d'une
populations
centrale solaire
to climate
de 20
vulnerability
kW
in the
près dans la
CR,
localité de Baloko située dans la périphérie de Bangui
which is marked by the
et la
installation of
réalisation d'un
20
forage et
kilowatt,
d'un château d'eau
a
potable
20
sur
kilowatt mini
pompe
solar
solaire.
plant
Enfin,
in Baloko,
l'insuffisance des ressources
located
constitue le défi
on
majeur
the outskirts in the
pour
peripheries,
que l'énergie
and the
soit
realization of the
véritablement
borehole
au
and
service des
solar-powered
populations.
water
Je vous remercie
tower.
pour votre bien aimable attention, mesdames et messieurs.
The main challenge is the insufficiency of resources. And ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Michel. We very much appreciate your laying out UNDP's aims to work with the Central African Republic and with MINUSCA and some of the priorities that you would put on the table. I have enjoyed all these speakers tremendously, but I'm also noticing that the half an hour we left for Q&A is no longer available for us. So what I might propose is if you've got a question, if you could drop it in the chat. And I've read a few already, so I'm going to very briefly go back to MINUSCA and Sophie and Romain for one quick set of questions. And then we would love to follow up with everybody here because this is a partnership. And also to say that if you're interested in the reports that we're describing, you can find them on the websites of the Stimson Center, Energy Peace Partners, or the Dickey Center, all these reports. And we'd love if the presenters today could share with us the slides that they sent, because I feel like we've just begun the conversation. So here's my quick question to the UN mission and to Sophie and Romain. It's a mix. One, we've talked a lot about partnerships, but to the UN in the field, you've got a lot of challenges. What else would you tell us that people outside of the mission itself could help you achieve to expand the access to renewable energy, both for the mission and for the communities you serve? And to Sophie and Romain, that question as well. What else would you prioritize? But I would also add, some of the questions have come about security. And in your analysis, the insecurity in the region is still part of the challenge for deploying and sustaining any kind of energy system. So one question comes from Megan Carroll about how do you factor that, particularly in some of the regions you saw, and another from Concordia asking, is it appropriate for the mission to even provide some sort of base security for energy resources outside the fence of MINUSCA? I know I'm just touching the surface, and I regret that I have to keep this so short. So Paulos, briefly over to you, and then I'll turn to Sophie and Romain to finish up, and we'll close after that. And please put your questions into the chat if you can.
Thank you, Victoria. Just to touch upon what you have, raised, especially what the mission requires from other partners to expand the renewable energy demand. The first thing which we are saying, as I have mentioned, we are working on improving our renewable energy share through the PPAs, the power purchase agreements. So what we are requesting now, we have got a limited areas, within our deployment sites. We are requesting the government to give us some additional areas where the commercial vendors can invest to put their structures for providing us this, the renewable energy power. So having that, securing those contracts, these contracts which we are, establishing are scalable. This, projects can benefit the local community. Once we get, this agreement and up and coming, we can provide, the vendor can provide power to the local community based on other arrangements. It's not like, whatever we are going into an agreement is for the mission's, use, but as we have said that it's scalable, which the vendor can get an agreement with the government to upscale what the investment which they are doing. So one area which we are we need is the government to provide us some additional plot of land, because as you know, investing in renewable energy, the infrastructure needs a very, very big area. So that's what we are working on. The second one is like we are mentioning about the grid. So the government of the Arab UAE and also the Norway. So if they are trying to upscale the government efforts on expanding the grid, that would help us in tapping from that resources, so that we can the mission will be able to tapping its energy requirements to these resources. That's what I have in my mind. I don't know. I'll come back to you for any other questions if there is.
Thank you so much, Paulos, to you and to your colleagues. Those are two important things, both more land and to create a greater access, and also maybe member states could help, including the ones hosting today, with thinking about grid extension. I appreciate that. Sophie, let me turn to you next, and then Romain. If you need me to repeat the question, I don't think you do. It's basically about what else would you prioritize, and then how do you think about security and energy protection? Thank you.
Well, Paulos definitely took the words out of my mouth or the ideas from my head for a couple of those. So in terms of grid extension, infrastructure to facilitate kind of the extension of energy resources and the availability of land, absolutely. I would also say, one thing that we noted in kind of during our research in Bangui was the sort of variance of kind of solar power availability, that during the rainy season, the solar might have some kind of disruptions or sort of a lower level of output, but at the same time, that's when hydropower is at its most powerful. So the Central African Republic, one clear advantage is the complementarity of hydropower and solar power. So to this point, I understand that MINUSCA has, for various reasons, at headquarters and in the mission, has not really explored the possibility of kind of mini hydro power plants. And I would encourage that. I mean, again, moving towards resilience, moving towards greater sustainability. These plants have really shown some success, of course, not in taking over the entire sort of energy cost of a base, but supplementing it, reducing it, making things more reliable. So definitely something to explore. And then I think there was a question about security. I'll talk about that a little bit. One of the things that's really, I mentioned kind of the logistical challenges facing the mission. Dig deeper into the details, part of the logistical challenge for the mission is the fact that security remains an issue in many parts of the country. And depending on sort of the security level rating of the particular road that a convoy has to travel along, it needs a certain kind of level of protection from MINUSCA military resources, which of course draws these troops away from sort of protection of civilians and other kind of mandates that they would otherwise be implementing. So security is really a concern in terms of kind of for the mission, in terms of extending its energy resources, in terms of the viability of projects, for sure. Of course, it's sort of like if you are able to get over that hurdle of sort of deploying we're setting up, renewable energy projects, then they are stationary. Presumably they're right next to the UN base and therefore easier to protect. There was also the question from Concordis about protecting local energy resources. I think absolutely. For me as someone who has kind of worked in and on UN missions and is now outside the UN, this is should be kind of a consideration in terms of the patrollings carried out by UN military and police kind of personnel, should be a consideration in terms of, each location is different in terms of kind of where the UN base is, where the kind of community resources are, where the energy infrastructure is. But it is a part of sort of protecting communities, and therefore at least kind of sort of in theory should be a consideration moving forward.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, Sophie. Romain, may I turn to you then?
Yes, thanks, Tori, and thanks, Sophie. I'll be short because I think I can mainly support what's been said by colleagues and by Sophie in particular. Just a couple of words on the security aspect. I think if I understood the remark well in the chat, is there was a question about, well, to which extent it is sound or realistic to deploy renewables or especially solar installations in such insecure area. I think, yeah, you can definitely make an argument that it's the case. Sophie just mentioned how vulnerable the convoys are to reach those places. And you need convoys to bring fuel when you rely on diesel generator, and you don't rely on such transport when you rely on solar energy. So from this point of view, it's definitely safer. Well, and not to repeat what Sophie said, I just want to draw everybody's attention to the example of Baidoa in Somalia, where there is an example of solar installation supporting a UN site, and as far as I know, also providing electricity to surrounding communities. And well, this is definitely not the safest place on earth. So I'm speaking under the control of people who've been involved in the implementation of this project, but I understand that it is working well both for the UN and local communities. So it shows that definitely there's room to implement such projects even in very unsafe areas. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I hate to cut this off. I can see more questions coming in, including how to have PPAs with uncertainty in the field. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to draw this to a close. I really want to thank all our speakers. I want to thank the UAE and Norway for hosting this conversation. I want to thank the Ministry of Energy with the Central African Republic for joining us today, as well as from the UN's mission in the Central African Republic and MINUSCO. Thank you so much. And then, of course, to Dave Mozurski and Sophie, as well, and Romain for the report, Andrew for his views on the larger fiscal situation, and to everybody here for participating. I think it demonstrates that this has to be a partnership. I know that our colleagues in the Department of Support and Joe with the UN had to jump off. They have been pivotal to all of this as well. So maybe I suggest that we could do a follow-up. We've had so much on the table we can't get through, but mainly let me thank you. Thank you to everybody for joining us today and to our hosts, and have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever you're headed into. And thank you.